Well, good evening. My name is Steve Price. I'm one of the pastors here with Trinity, and it is my privilege to welcome you to this evening's concert. We are in the middle of a wonderful weekend of music here at Trinity with two of the finest church music composers and conductors you could ever want to be around. One of them just happens to be my father, but I'm not biased. Dr. Melbourne Price and Joseph Martin. And for those of you who don't know the story, there is a relationship between the two of them that goes back 40 years to when Joe was a college accompanist, and I'm sure he may have a word or two to say about that this evening as well. And during those years, one of my fondest memories, I was just a little bit younger than Joe, not much, but one of my fondest memories is sitting beside him, and as he furiously played across the piano keys, trying to keep up with him and turning the pages for him. So it's a real treat to welcome them both here this weekend. Tonight for Joe's concert, you're also going to get to hear from his wife Sue, and he'll share more about her a little bit later as well. And then tomorrow we would love for you to come back if you don't already have plans for Sunday morning. Our church choirs that had the opportunity to work with them this morning will be offering lots of special music in both our 8:15 and 11 a.m. worship services tomorrow morning. So again, welcome. Joe is a man who does not need much in the way of introduction. His record and his accomplishments speak for themselves, and he will have plenty to tell you about wonderful stories. And so, Joe, would you come and spend some time with us tonight?
How do I turn it on? There we go. Thank you. Good evening. That was very kind of you. Always an honor to have the opportunity of sharing my music, and nothing I like better than playing the piano for folks. So what a warm and wonderful reception already. I'm just going to share with you some of my musical journey, having grown up in a minister's home, and my mother was a church pianist, and I've been sort of celebrating that inheritance of song my entire life, message and music dancing together. And so tonight I'm going to walk through some of my life, and hopefully it'll be something that'll be an encouragement to you. I pray that it will be. I grew up in rural North Carolina in a little town called Frog Level. Now, Frog Level is near Sandy Mush, for those of you who don't know where it is. It's about 5 miles on the other side of Dirty Ankle, North Carolina. It's Dirty Ankle, Sandy Mush, and Frog Level. We call it the Tri-City area. And not much going on in Frog Level. In fact, we're so small, our 7-Eleven is like a 3.5. It's just really tiny. But there was a lot of church music and a lot of folk music, and so that's kind of what nurtured my spirit and my faith in those early days. And so I hope you will not care too much if I take you on a little Appalachian journey as I share some folk songs and some sacred songs from that era. And I think I'll start with just a little collage, something I'll put together. We'll call it American Tapestry. Some melodies you'll recognize, some from the bluegrass tradition, and some from, traditional shape note hymnody, just timeless melodies, and usually gathered around some treasured truths of the faith. And so I hope you recognize a few of these tunes. Let's take a journey together. Maybe a few melodies that you recognize, hopefully there. Hymnody was a really important part of my first experiences with music, and my mother being the church pianist, I enjoyed listening to her play the hymns, and she was also classically trained. And I had these precious memories of going to sleep at night and after a long, hard day, Mom going into the parlor there and finding the spinet, getting out her music books, and I could just... Just something very satisfying about falling asleep listening to those great melodies, And my dad, he had no appreciation for classical music. I can remember him screaming from the other room, "Hey, Barbara, why don't you play something with a melody?" Well, of course, these are the greatest themes of all time, but Dad didn't appreciate them or understand them, and he wanted to hear songs that he appreciated, And he was certainly very appreciative of music, but his horizons were not quite as wide as Mom's. And in those days, how many of you, I should ask this question, how many of you have had piano lessons in your life? Wow, that's like a good 75%, 80% maybe. Do you remember your first recital piece? Yeah, after that's when you quit, you remember? Yeah, well, some of you raised your hand. You want to come up and share it with us tonight if you still remember it? I remember my first recital piece. See if you remember this. Do you remember that one? Oh, somebody got it right. Swans on the Lake. The rest of you, now you know why you're sitting out there and I'm sitting up here. I paid attention in my lessons. Swans on the Lake, you are awesome that you knew that. Were you in the red books? Yes, bless your heart. We're going to start a 12-step recovery group for red book people after the concert. Those red books, they have sold millions and started people on the right road for how many, since the early part of the last century. The red books, yes. Oh my, I remember this one. That one or this one? My mom had to have a prescription of little pills after I learned that one. I just played it over and over and over and over. Fur Elise. My teacher had a Fur Elise sign on their door with a red slash going through the middle of it. I think they had a little burnout on that piece, But everybody who starts and learns the piano has this little bit of a journey. And in the old days, and this is my whole point about this, is that they thought if you only played either by music or by ear. They didn't think that those two could be together. They were somehow damaging to each other. They were exclusive. So you either learn to play the right way or by ear. Well, my mother, bless her heart, she wanted me to learn the classical technique. So she went and found me a teacher who had training and started me with the scales and the arpeggios and such. And Dad says, I want him to play some gospel music. People like gospel music. They don't want to hear that long-haired stuff. And so he found me another teacher. And they were both on, opposite sides of the pedagogical equation. My formal teacher, teaching my first minuets, certainly got me started with good technique and learning how to read music. But the other lady that Dad found was the lady who played for all the Fifth Sunday singings in Frog Level, North Carolina. Now, let me talk to you about Frog Level. They had a little store that sold sundries as you started the crooked little trek up towards Chimney Rock and the Blue Ridge Parkway. They had a 5-room schoolhouse where I went to school, and all the way up through high school was in that one little schoolhouse. They had a volunteer fire department, and let's see what else. 37 Baptist churches. And they all would come together on that fifth Sunday and worship around casseroles. It was an unusual religion. And they would sing. All the Luckadoo family singers would come out of the mountains. And this lady who played for all these families that sang together, and they all sang the same song, you know, I'll Fly Away. That's all they knew. But they all had a different sound. Her name was Miss Mamie. And she had been doing it for 127 years. And she had this style. Now, some of you with a little silver in your hair may remember this style. It's a tremolo style. And she would take the notes of a chord and just kind of shake them out. It sounded like a saloon now that I think about it. Looking back, I wonder kind of what she had done in the early part of her musical training, you know, before she found the Lord. So here were the tremolos, you know, and I was 7 years old, and it was so mesmerizing to me because it's so different than what I was learning in my other lessons. And I just watch her shake those notes out, and she'd get going, and that stride bass going this way, and that hand going that way, and I was just sitting, and you know those things that hang under your arm and kind of flap? I'm not sure I know what they call those, but she had 2 of them, and they weighed about 25 pounds each. And I was watch them. And you know, some of you will remember this. In those days, they didn't have air conditioning, so that get a little breeze going through the sanctuary. But Miss Mamie was a kind lady, and Dad wanted me to learn how to play gospel music. And he remained very much committed to gospel music. He actually owned 2 gospel radio stations in addition to his church work. And so that was why it was so dear to him. And this last November, what a joy, and I wish my father had lived to see it. I actually wrote a bluegrass cantata that was premiered at Carnegie Hall that brought together gospel music and classical music and put them together. It was like Mom and Dad finally made peace about my music. I wonder if I might beg you to allow me to play a Miss Mamie medley for you tonight, all right? It's not a formal Sunday morning, so they told me I was getting paid by the note, so I want to play this one if you don't mind. Thank you, dear. That was aerobic piano playing right there. If I could package that and sell it on late night TV, that'd be a new thing, wouldn't it? We travel all the time, 300 days a year. Me and Sue, Sue not quite 300. She stays home and feeds a cat every once in a while. And 3 times a year, we go to Europe. And I really recharge my batteries during those trips. I like to go to old libraries and old bookstores and look for hidden treasures and find new old melodies, you see, that I'm unfamiliar with, because every culture has its own worship vocabulary. And I think it's just miraculous that God gave us that box of crayons that you got on Christmas, the Crayolas, you remember the ones that had the sharpener on the back? Not the ones that you got on vacation where they stopped at a gas station, got just the 8 basic colors. We've got that entire box of Crayolas, salmon and tungsten and all these beautiful crayon colors, and that's what I like to paint with. And every time we go someplace new, I discover that we have so many different voices, but we have this one unifying song that draws it all together. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. Not scary at all, that diversity makes us strong. And certainly in the music, who would want to listen to the same thing all the time? Oh, no, not at all. And so I spend a lot of time going through these old libraries. And sometimes those melodies that you discover, you find out. For instance, I played one in the early set with the Appalachians. Come to find out, I found the origins of that melody in Ireland. So you see, the people when they immigrated, they brought their songs, and they kind of evolved and morphed into new songs, and new texts were placed with them. It's an organic thing. It's just really a miracle when you think about it. My mother is Native American. Cherokee, because we lived up in that part of North Carolina, and all our years, Mother has beautiful olive skin to this day, and when she was young, she had long jet black hair. It was so beautiful. I could watch her brush that black hair. Oh, so beautiful. And my grandfather, her father, high cheekbones and just sort of a stoic personality, and just very quintessential sort of how we think of the noble Native American look. Cherokee it was. And we always knew this, and it was a mystery in our family in some ways, but there were stories and legends that came about how that all took place, and we took a great deal of pride in it. Now, Mom had always wanted to know how much Native American was part of her inheritance. And so, because, we'd gone to the conferences and things to learn about genealogy of Native Americans. And she also kind of thought in the back of her mind that maybe some of the grandchildren might get a discount at a college, for this. Well, we've got to play that game if we have to. And so, I, being the thoughtful son that I am, bought her a 23andMe, which is a genetic testing kit, which will go back and tell you where you came from. If I were you, I would not do that. Mom went through all the things, and she sent it off, and it takes several months to get the full analysis back. And she calls me, and I could tell she's upset about something. And she says, "Joe, would you get on this website and explain to me what's going on?" And I go, "Well, what is it, Mom?" She goes, "Well, I got my test back." And I go, "Well, let's get on there and look." I said, "You're probably not understanding all of this computer stuff." And I got on there, and I looked, and I said, "Oh, my. Mom, I don't know how to tell you this, but not one drop of Indian blood in you." And it was a crisis for her. She's 99% Irish. How could this family legend have gathered around us all these years, and we were just so prideful of it? And here she was, 99% Irish. And I could tell it upset her, and she paused for a minute, and she goes, "And you don't have to know I'm Mountain Mama." So she has an accent. She's not like me. She has an accent. 99% Irish. Well, I guess that's why I like taters so much. My mom's a very positive person, so she rebounded very quickly. But that's not the disturbing thing, folks. Later, we were contacted by 23andMe. Apparently, this side of the family has a very rare genetic marker. that they want to do testing on. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. My mother's an artist. My brother's an artist. My grandfather was a painter, and musicians are in the family. I wonder if we're going to find out where all that came from. And it sounded so wonderful. And I was, of course we will participate in this study, this worldwide study. As I got more into it, we are 99.999 rich in this genetic marker. And I thought, okay, well, let's read on. Let's find out about it. Apparently, we are in that very small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. To remind you all, Neanderthals are the ones that drag their knuckles along the ground. Troglodytes, if you will. Don't do 23andMe. You might be afraid of what you find out. Now, all of that for two reasons. To let the blood rush back to my fingers, for me to hydrate, and for me to play now for my Irish mum, an old Irish Gaelic folk song, and I hope you like it. I like to play impressionistic music. Could you hear some of the sounds of nature? We sing that, and at least my tradition is Morning Has Broken. And it has all this beautiful imagery of nature and how God reveals himself in recreation and in creation. And I love that message, and I love the images it brings to mind. And it really works, I think, to try to imitate that and bring it to life with figurations on the piano and such. So it's something that I enjoy doing. And nature is something that I have often looked to, even in some of my lyric writing and some of my songwriting. And in one of my travels, I was in Colorado Springs. Has anyone here been to Colorado Springs? Lovely place. And there is a famous American song that you are well familiar with that was written there in Colorado Springs on top of Pikes Peak, which is the highest mountain in that area. Do you know what it is? America the Beautiful was written there. There's a big plaque there you can travel to see and stand and look out over that incredible vista, the Rocky Mountains, you know, down into the valleys and see where Purple Mountain's majesty and those images and that beautiful poem that means so much to so many was created. Well, on kind of a pilgrimage to that area, hoping to find some inspiration, a friend of mine and I took a day and traveled up there and did some hiking. And it was one of those perfect Colorado days with the azure blue skies and this little crooked little river running through the valley there, where it's an alpine valley with all these little tiny flowers, so it looked like a watercolor painting almost. And elk were grazing, and it was just idyllic in a way. And we sat there, and really it was a spiritual moment. And composers always take ways of writing down, little sketch pads and things. And as a sort of a spiritual exercise between the two of us, we made lists of things that were meaningful to us in our lives, things that proved to our spirits that there was a graceful and loving God who blesses and loves his children. And looking out over that beautiful valley, some of those nature scenes, it's hard to believe that someone couldn't imagine a God that loves us. But then there's all these things that we have in our lives on a day-to-day basis that also affirm that for us, you see. And so that was the idea behind the song, was to juxtapose these beautiful images of nature, these grand things that many people are inspired by, but also to recall those blessings in our own life, which might appear to be ordinary because we're used to them, you see. But still, without them, there would be such diminishment of our joy. And we put together this song, and we called it Nothing Left to Say. Now, what's interesting about it, in my own humble opinion, is that there are moments in the piece that are silent. That sometimes is awkward for us in this time, in this day and age, because everything is so noisy and kinetic. But these are silences that are planned. These are times that you can reflect on the things that say in your life, God is. And I'm going to ask my wife, Sue, to come and sing this song called Nothing Left to Say. And if you'll listen with your heart's ears and search your own life's experience, your own life journey, I suspect maybe in the silence you might remember something very, very special in the ways that God has shown you his love through the years. Sue.
I see the morning rise, when I gaze at cloudless skies, or watch a golden eagle as she flies. There's nothing left to say, there's nothing left to say, there's nothing left to say. God is. When I watch the children play, dancing through a summer's day, dreaming, singing, laughing all the way, there's nothing left to say. There's nothing left to say. There's nothing left to say. God is. When I see the falling snow touch the beauty of a rose, trace the winding river as it flows. When I hear that symphony or creation's tapestry, people reaching out with loves and praise. When I hear a symphony, view creation's tapestry, or wonder at life's sacred mystery, there's nothing left to say. There's nothing left to say. There's nothing left to say. Lord, we stand amazed. Nothing left to say.
She'll steal the show if I don't watch it. Well, can you imagine what a joyful life I have getting to accompany? If you want to ask me, Joe, what do you like to do the best? I love accompanying. I always have. And I know people say, oh, you're a performer. Oh, you're just so natural to perform. I love to accompany. I learned that from Dr. Price when I was at Furman. I fell in love with it. When I went to my graduate work, I accompanied every ensemble and voice studio and violin students and everything else. I just enjoy that partnership. Now, flash forward to 20 years, and I meet this incredible singer who needs a piano player. And so I get to do my dream job just about every weekend and get to play for Sue. Oh, by the way, Sue lived in Central Florida for 20 years. And I lived in Fort Lauderdale for 15. My father took a job, moved from Frog Level to Fort Lauderdale. Now, folks, that's a cultural shock right there, let me tell you. I went to church the first Sunday, looked up there in that choir loft. All the choir members had on shoes. It was different. But Sue grew up in Ohio and was discovered in college by a famous choir director, an entertainer by the name of Fred Waring. And he seemed to be missing a redhead at the time. And so she got this job traveling around the country and singing in such wonderful places with Fred Waring. And Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians, you remember that, right? Yeah. And so Sue treasures that time. But Mr. Waring had a stroke and passed away. And a lot of those singers suddenly, because he had left instructions, no ghost choir, no ghost choir. After I'm gone, it's gone, right? And so they just happened to be opening this place down there called Epcot Center. And a lot of those singers from the Fred Waring tradition went to Epcot and became the Voices of Liberty, Derek Johnson's Voices of Liberty. And Sue, almost a charter member of that group, and stayed on for 20 years with Disney, doing the Hoop-de-Doo Review, Broadway at the top, singing for about 5 or 6 of the presidents that we have had in that period of time. And I know it sounds awful, but the thing is, that she got the call one day, and they were looking for a special Disney princess to launch this new show that was starting for Disney Cruise Lines. It was going to premiere there and then go to Broadway, and then it was called The Little Mermaid. And Sue got to be the first live Little Mermaid on stage with Disney Cruise Lines. And so I married a fish. And since I married a fish, I'd like for her to sing a few scales for you. You better go start the truck. But since I met her, my life has real porpoise. You see, porpoise is okay, so it's a tough crowd. I know, well, it is bad jokes, I know. But Sue, you might want to, what was that experience like? Talk. Save me from my jokes.
From yourself. It was an honor, first off, when they asked 12 of us to come and audition for the part of Ariel, the Little Mermaid. I walked into the room and I looked at 12 people who looked just like me. Same height, same kind of build. I fortunately was the only one with real red hair. So, anyway, they narrowed it down to 3 of us, and the 3 that they asked to stay, they put us in full costume and makeup and took pictures from every angle of our face, because they're very protective of how their characters are portrayed. They're drawn characters, whether you're Snow White or Cinderella or Alice in Wonderland. If you're going to portray them, you have to kind of look like them. And fortunately, God made me the way they had drawn Ariel, and I got the job. So I was very honored and very thrilled to be a part of all that.
And so I found this pretty girl who needed a piano player and has no taste in men, and the rest is history, right? One of the other things that she got to do is do a lot of shows, Music Man, Little Night Music, so many things that Disney experience opened doors for her, and so what an honor it is for me to play for her. I think tonight I would like for them to see your higher register. And there's this wonderful piece that we do a lot in the cathedrals in Europe, because they have this really, it's a place where the churches sing back to you, because sometimes 8, 9, 10-second reverberation, and sometimes those higher notes just, they're just amazing. It's like angels singing. And so I've fallen in love with this piece by Andrew Lloyd Webber from his Requiem called Pie Jesu. And so I'd like for her to sing it for you tonight.
Requiem. requiem, sempiternam, sempiternam.
Thank you. Well, I hope tonight has been enjoyable to you, maybe a little sorbet for the soul, and it certainly has been wonderful for us. And thank you for listening to my stories and listening to my music. The gift of your 2 ears has been a blessing to me tonight. I want to end with a song, but I have to ask, Stephen, do you have insurance on the piano? It's okay. You get it. Okay. I mean, I have damaged a few instruments in my time. Now this piece is pretty virtuosic in a way. It tells a Bible story. It's an old spiritual. People love spirituals. I love arranging spirituals. They just have packed full of meaning and many, many beautiful moments. This one tells the story of Joshua. And you may remember the mighty men of valor and the story from Scripture where they marched around the city and blew the trumpets and shouted at exactly the right time in obedience to God. And there was a great victory. Though you remember the walls come tumbling down, right? You kind of have to know that story in order to appreciate the programmatic elements of this piece I'm getting ready to play. Again, thank you. Sue and I will enjoy greeting you after the concert. We'll be back in the back and would love to talk to you and just connect. I will end with this piece called Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho. And I actually plan to play every note on the piano. So. Will you hang on to that for me, please? All right. Thanks, sir. I'll give you that. I'd like to have a word of prayer for the piano, please.
So a week or two ago, I recall that as we were telling you all about Joe coming, one of us made a comment, and in encouraging you to come out tonight, we said, you know, we want you to know that what you'll see tonight, on this night, will be as good as anything that you would go to the Phillips Center to see. Now, I'm pretty certain that when we made that comment, there were a few skeptics out in the crowd. So just by another clap of hands, can I know how many believers we have now tonight? It has indeed been a great night. I'm so glad you all were here for it. I want to thank the Trinity United Methodist Church Foundation. Over the last few years, they have been providing some seed money for new initiatives and special event opportunities in the life of the church. And this is one of those. And so I'm grateful to the foundation for providing the grant that made tonight possible. We look forward to being able to do more things like this. And so as you go out tonight, if you would like to make a donation to support these efforts, you'll see boxes at each of the exit doors. Feel free to make a donation there. And Joe, I was thinking that if somebody here were to give a penny for every note you played tonight, we would be well funded for the next event. But thank you again for being here. Reminder that tomorrow morning at both 8:15 and 11, Joe and Dr. Milburn Price will be conducting a choir of about 60 voices in a number of selections that will be the centerpiece of worship at those two services for tomorrow. We hope you have a great evening, and Catherine's going to offer a word of prayer as we go on our way.
Actually, just a blessing. So stand and... You know, Joe started tonight with a medley, and in that medley, he played Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, which is one of my favorites. And so I trust as we all go out tonight that our hearts are tuned to sing God's grace. And may God, the fount of every blessing, and may Jesus Christ, who overflows with redeeming love, and may the flaming tongues of the Holy Spirit go with you and lead you and guide you and undergird you and inspire you to sing God's loudest praise. Amen.
And Joe and Sue would love to say hello to you if you would like. You also, if you would be interested, there are some CDs of his work available at a table back in the back, and we'd be happy to help you with those.